So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Harley Erdman. My pronouns are he, him. I'm chair of the UMass Amherst Department of Theater, and I am really thrilled to welcome you here to the first in our series, Women in Theatrical Design. The series responds to a pressing problem. Women are woefully underrepresented in theater design and technical fields. According to a 2015 United Scenic Artists study, professional positions nationwide in these areas featured men as 86% of the lighting designers, 79% of the scenic designers, and 91% of the sound designers. Even design fields that have better representation of women, such as costume, struggle with being devalued within the industry. We're really fortunate and proud that at UMass, all 4 of our faculty designers are women. But UMass is not the larger world. It's not representative of the larger field. And so over the course of March, we've invited 4 outstanding women designers to share their perspectives, to talk about their craft, and offer their inspirations. And today we start with an illustrious guest costume designer, and will be followed with next week on Monday, March 8th, with a sound designer, a lighting designer on March 16th, and a scenic designer on March 30th, all of them hosted in conversation with our faculty in each of those areas. I want to quickly give a few thank yous. First of all, to all of you who are out there, all those participants. I was scrolling through the list, some people who are around, some people who are farther away, and some people who are quite far away and I haven't seen for a while. We miss you, and I'm so glad you're here. I also especially want to thank or note that this series is made possible with support from Women for UMass Amherst, aka WFUM. It's a network of alumni that promotes the advancement of campus programs that provide access, support, and opportunity for UMass Amherst students, with preferences to those projects that positively impact women. Other thanks, big thank you to Anna Maria Gosens, to Willow Cohen, to my colleagues in design, Amy Altadonna, Yao Chen, Anya Klepikov, and Penny Remsen, to D. Boyle Clapp in the Arts Extension Service, and also big shout out to Jordan Mitchell, who was a superstar in actually helping us secure this big grant in the first place. I also want to acknowledge first that we gather as the University of Massachusetts Amherst Department of Theater on the traditional land of the Nipmuc Wabanaki Confederacy and the Pecumtuck peoples past and present, whose ancient relationships with the land continue to this day. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the people who have stewarded it throughout the generations. Please take a moment to celebrate the resilience and strength that all Indigenous peoples have shown worldwide. And for those of you, the many of you joining us from another location, you can check out the link that'll be posted in the chat to find out more about Indigenous communities where you're residing. Now I am very honored to welcome today's host, who is going to introduce today's guest. And our host is UMass Professor of Costume Design, Yao Chen. Yao's designs have been seen in the United States, in China, and Costa Rica. She's had recent productions at Trinity Rep, Indiana Rep, Orlando Rep, Seattle Children's Theater, many others. Her work has been featured in exhibits in Taiwan, in Mexico, and Poland, and she's been a visiting lecturer at the Shanghai Institute of Visual Art. We're really lucky to have Professor Yao Chen in our department, and here she is on screen to introduce today's guest.
Thank you, Harley, very much for introduction. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Yao Chen. I'm currently the assistant professor of costume design at UMass Amherst Theater Department. I'm honored to bring our very first guest of our series of Women in Theatrical Design. And Anita Yavich is an accomplished costume designer in the United States. She has been actively designing costume in Broadway, off-Broadway, regional theaters across US, and various international venues. Broadway credits include Full Love, Venice in Fur, Chinglish, and Anna in Tropic. New York credits includes numerous productions in Public, Atlantic Theater Company, Roundabout Theater, Manhattan Theater Clubs. Her opera credits include Aida at San Francisco Opera, Cyrano de Bergerac at La Scala, Metropolitan Opera, and the Royal Opera House. The Trojans at Metropolitan Opera. Her current projects include The Reign of Nibelung at Opera Australia, Bristol, Lampica at La Gela Playhouse, and she's going to share us several of her productions and take us behind the scene of these epic stories. Her speeches are going to be around 30 minutes, so please feel free to type your questions in Q&A session. Me and 2 other facilitators is going to collect these questions and ask Anita in our Q&A session following her speech. So welcome, Anita.
Hi, everybody. Really great to be here. I was born in Hong Kong when it was a British colony. Just a little bio about me. And my parents, they were fleeing from the Cultural Revolution in China, and they settled in Hong Kong. And when I was 13, I moved to Nigeria to live with my father. And Nigeria at that time was celebrating 22nd year of independence from Britain. And then I went to a local school, and I was the only Chinese student among my Yoruba classmates at the local middle school. And at the end of the year, I transferred to American International School, where I had classmates from Pakistan, Holland, Italy, the US, also some Nigerian classmates as well. Basically students from all over the world. I think at the American International School, it was the first time that I realized what I say in class actually really mattered. So that was the first time that I thought, oh, I better really get the English language down. So every night I would practice to my ceiling and in front of the mirror in the bathroom, just to make sure I can communicate actively. And so all in all, I feel that I've been very fortunate to be educated on 3 different continents, Asia, Africa, and North America. And even though it has been difficult to always have to uproot and pack and move and get adjusted to a new environment, I think that it really, being exposed to all of these different cultures and their histories at such a young age really made me acutely aware of the depth of cultural differences, a perspective that I have been able to apply to all of my work. And I went to UC Santa Barbara as a linguistics major, but I really wanted to be an artist. And I was very fortunate to have met my mentor, Dunya Ramikova, who has been the main collaborator with Peter Sellers, on all of these great revolutionary at the time Mozart operas, modernized versions. I also, of course, went to Yale and had really great mentors, Ming Cho Lee, Jane Greenwood, Jennifer Tipton, Tom McAllister. So I kind of I've been designing now for decades. And today, it's a great opportunity also for me to take a moment and look back at the work that I have been doing all these years. And I kind of come to an understanding that basically how everything I have experienced kind of got me onto a path where my designs are usually about creating different worlds, and they really revolve around a few ideas. Reconstructing history, that's one of the way I construct a world, or reconceive the idea of clothing, or retelling of myths, and reinvention of archetypes. So these are the few things that I've been actively working on and thinking about through the course of my career. So today, the slideshow, I am presenting 6 productions and share some of the ideas that I have been working on over the years. So I am going to do my lovely PowerPoint. I'm going to talk about Les Troyens, which is a huge opera. It was my Metropolitan Opera debut, and it has over 500 costumes. And I designed and we had it all built in 1 year, which is record time. Obviously, Les Troyens is based on Aeneid, which is not only about the Trojan War, but it's about Aeneas traveling from Troy to Carthage and fell in love with Dido. And then, of course, he had to follow his destiny to go on to Italy. It's an epic opera, and the question is, how do you tell this ancient story? In a way, like I decided to reconstruct, um, take the idea of reconstructing history. So my idea was really based on the study of archaeological fragments and patchwork, and just kind of piece this whole thing together. I want to create a language that is really that reflects like all the different groups of people that we're portraying. We have soldiers, we have royalties, we have shamans, the priests. Here's uh, the sketch for Aeneas in his armor. And we have Priam and Hecuba. So I was really playing with the idea of how something can be pieced back together. And I took a lot of course, inspiration from the Gold of Troy, and implemented that into the design as well. At some point, after Cassandra, Hector, Priam, and Hecuba died, they come back as ghosts and ask Aeneas to not forget the mission that he has to go to Italy, and should really just like forget about Carthage and move on to his journey. So I also get to explore the idea of ghost. Now, besides the idea of patchwork, I was also thinking about, what if something was ripped or missing, or we have in this opera 80 choristers, and then we have also supers. They don't sing, and they're more like actors, and we also have actors. So I wanted to come up with a modular way of approaching the design for the chorus members. And, Trojan War spanned over 10 years, and, maybe everybody is ready to fight at all hours of the day. So maybe they would even pick up pieces of armor from another soldier who died, and sew it onto their costumes as a form of protection. So I was really kind of playing around with that idea. And then with the women, I thought, well, what if pieces, instead of doing small patchwork, I was like, oh, maybe they even have a whole piece missing, and what would you see underneath? And, how do they piece different things together? Really exposing, how the actual garment was constructed, architecturally. And that, of course, go all the way down to, we also have many children in the opera. I mean, it's huge. And when we go to the world of Carthage, it's a much more world of utopian world. And when we first meet Dido, she's in white, very utopian color, asymmetrical outfit. And of course, once she started to fall in love with Aeneas, we have this whole idea of purple kind of going through. And I used the patchwork motif in a way, but more like to illustrate the idea of like when you fall in love, all of these currents are moving through you like a vortex. This purple dress was very difficult to make. I believe the draper spent she tried like 3, 4, 5 times to make this dress. It's very difficult to make a dress like this with strips of fabrics that are, at different curves and angles. And the Carthage men, basically I wanted to, we have very limited time, but I wanted to make sure that everybody could look individual. I really just kind of took the idea of utopian society from many different cultures and just kind of weave it all together. So you have some kind of like, maybe a little bit Indian elements, you have a little bit like Greek, Roman, draping and tailored combination. And basically, based on these 7 basic styles we approach for all the male members of the chorus, and it's in the fitting that I individuate them. So actually when you see them all on stage, they all look individual. You really couldn't really tell that they were all based on these 7 patterns. And the same way I approach with the female, and I also designed 7 different, I mean, you can also see in this society, like, they're kind of unisex design, right? So they're like, kind of gender neutral designs, and even down to the children. And we have also dancers that were doing special performances, to entertain the Queen and Aeneas. And when the ghosts come back, what I wanted to, the idea of the ghosts is that everything has faded away. And the only thing they are holding on to is how they died. So it's their fatal wound. So I basically kept the exact structure and the pattern of the patchwork, except I just reduced it all to white and different levels of translucency, and with the wound coming forward from underneath. It was really very powerful, and the paint shop, they did an amazing job. So in order to make sure that I was just kind of playing around with the patchwork idea and figure out the vocabulary, the first thing I did was I actually made small half-scale pieces in order to see the color and the pattern. And later on, when we did lighting rehearsals, which were months before we actually have dress rehearsals, we made life-size pieces to see how they read on stage. And, a lot of times people say, oh, the Metropolitan, these big opera houses, don't bother with all the details. Nobody will see it. But I think it's really about contrast. So if you play with cool color against warm color, you can really push the details out, all the way to the back of the house. You won't miss it. So it's a matter of proportion, obviously, and using the colors to pop the details out. And with the armor, I wanted to figure out a way to, the insignia and different levels of where, each soldier is. So I created a different weaving pattern of this gold and silver. This is also half scale, and I was just trying to figure out what kind of combination of pattern I could make by doing this kind of weaving, cross weaving pattern. So here are some screenshots, photos from the production. This is the first production in 2003. We had Deborah Voigt as Cassandra. We had Ben Hebner as Aeneas, and all the chorus. And later on, we have a remount in 2013, I believe, and with a different cast, and here's still Deborah Voigt and Eduardo Valdez. Many different great casts. This is from the, and you can see the Greeks, against the Trojan in this scene. The set was designed by Maria Bjornsson, who was a genius designer who designed Phantom of the Opera set and costumes. It was really amazing to meet with her. And fortunately, she passed away before we started actual rehearsal. So, the opening night of this production was definitely dedicated to her. And you can see she has really designed everything and every single prop. She's a really complete designer. And this is Carthage, and you can see Dido standing up, and all the people are like attending to her, and every single backpack of the wheat, the boat, the flags, they were all, everything had a drawing designed by Maria. And oh, this is such a beautiful site of Carthage. All this whole drop, the birds, the kites, all work together so beautifully. And here's Hector's ghost coming back, and you can see how the costume has been constructed, and they're like sheer white on white pieces with the blood painted on it. And here's a close-up of, and Lorraine Hunt, my God, what a wonderful singer. I mean, every rehearsal, she would sing full out. She never held her voice back. And you can just feel the music coming out of all her pores. Very sad loss to the music world. Here's close-up of that beautiful purple dress and Lorraine Hunt as Aeneas was abandoning her, going to Italy. And of course, the end with her killing herself on the pyre. That's the end of the opera. The next project I want to present is Nathan the Wise. It's a really great play by Gotthold Ephraim Lessing, and it was directed by Brian Kulick. And this is a play that's set in, really about enlightenment. It's set in the Third Crusade. It deals with religious tolerance, right? And really, that was the one time that all these three religions revolved, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, kind of coalesced, in the love of the Knight Templar. And I went to Brian and I said, oh, I really only have one idea. My idea was very inspired by micrography, which is like writing in very tiny script. Right? That's known, for since the second millennium BCE. Is found on, Sumerian clay tablets. But really, I think, microcalligraphy is also what is also called is a Jewish form of calligrams developed in the 9th century, which parallels Christianity and Islam. It really uses the minute Hebrew letters to form representational, geometric, and abstract design. The reason why I am so drawn to this is that, it is a very interesting idea to use this to solve the visual artists who want to remain devout in observation of Jewish law. They could only use text but not images, so they use the text to create images. Of course, this similar restriction also exists in certain Muslim societies, so it has been also adapted in Islamic calligraphy. So in many ways, calligraphy was like something that all these cultures have in common. And, it's just so moving to see, how this all worked together. So I took the time and really just learned how to write Hebrew. I learned how to write calligraphy, Islamic calligraphy, and of course, as in the Christian illuminated manuscript. Another inspiration source is from the carpet pages, which are also like the decorative page, which all these three religions have some kind of illuminated manuscript. And when you open the, first after you open the cover, you always come on this carpet page. And that was kind of how I really inspired me for some of the motifs that I have used for the design. And yet another, the whole idea of writing is just so magnificent and amazing. Talismanic Shirt also is a worn textile that is like used for protection. They are found throughout the Islamic world. And they're also in Turkey. Of course, I saw some in the Topeka Museum. And really, it's like a way to, sometimes they are written with symbols of quotations from the Quran, and names, inscribed names that are capable of offering protection and guidance, right? A lot of times these shirts are, and you can even see as something in common with the carpet page, this kind of design motif. And, these shirts are worn to protect many evil, and most of them have been used as a shield in battle. So you'd wear it underneath your armor. And here are some close up, and there are some also astrological, numbers. And so here are some of the designs that I had. And in order to make this happen within the limited budget, I have to do a lot of planning in advance as well. But I really try to write all these scripts, and because some of these are taken from scripture, I purposely make some mistakes so I'm not like, offending the religion. So this is the costume for Nathan the Wise. Basically, all of these characters start out in their regular date modern clothing, and then as they tell the story, they would put on these clothing in black and white as they go into the past to tell the story. And I have, in order to make this budget work, we have to kind of digital print some of this, and some of these cannot be digitally printed. They have to be silk screen and hand painted. So I have to actually, in order to make this dress, I have to design this and print this pattern. So that I can't print yardage. I have to predetermine the pattern pieces and print it accordingly so that they would all match like a jigsaw puzzle on the body. This is for Saladin's kaftan, and you can really see the carpet page influence and medallion. And so this was a combination of silk screening and hand painting. So the other challenge is to make sure they all look alike, so you don't feel like, oh, this is definitely computer printed. So that was very challenging. And here are all the rest of the costumes with the calligraphy and figuring out the scale and the pattern. And here, these are the original strips that we, try to do a sample printing. And this was the printing in process. This is the garment. This was for F. Murray Abraham. And here are some production photos. The Silver River is an opera that is about the Milky Way, which is called the Silver River in Chinese. And it's really about how the goddess weaver fell in love with a mortal, and because mortal and celestial beings, they can't really be together. In the end, their love was so strong that her father, the Jade Emperor, said, okay, one day a year you can meet. So anyways, for me, it's about kind of reimagining this myth, right? Everybody know these characters in our culture, but I was trying to go back and think, oh, what if the dragons on the dragon robes, they were actually real in heaven? What would that look like? So the whole idea of 3D design just like really came to me. And so these costumes are really expensive because they are all hand painted and then hand quilted and then put together. So it's, and this is a goddess weaver, and what she does is weave stars. So beautiful, what an idea. We also have the golden buffalo. She's like in earth clothing, but she's like kind of pretending to be, she really goes to both places. And this is like when she is in heaven, she has her celestial robe. And then we have some attendants that are, wearing, they have a dragon stole, like, so the dragon can just kind of, kind of wrap around their torso. They also have portable auras. Who doesn't need one of those? That's all hand painted and hand quilted as well. And here are some of the production photos. So it's like really 3D. It's like, they just jump right out at you. Very beautifully painted. They took a long time to construct many detailed pieces. And for the story of Macbeth, for Theater for a New Audience, my idea was really based on utilitarian costumes, in military clothing, right? So I was very inspired by brigandine, which is a soft, flexible armor, back in the 15th century. That was like little bits of metal sewn onto leather as a form of protection. And the other idea is that it's a feudal world where, the only way you can have territory is fight for it. So even when they have their armors off, they're still armored, so because you're just prepared to fight all the time in order to maintain the territory. So, of course, I also love the idea of fur, for Duncan. And of course, after he was killed by Macbeth, got the same, red fur. And for the women, I felt like, it was very much about the vulnerability that they don't have anything to protect themselves. So they use whatever else they have underneath. And some of the design for the witches, I wanted to be like, you can't tell whether they're male or female. They're bearded, but with very long hair. And here's the armor research that I was telling you about, the brigandine. And then I started to again use the half scale model to figure out how I can create and construct this. And here are some production photos. And you can see how it's really come right off of the idea of that first little half scale model that I was doing. And you can still see the ranking and insignia in their clothing underneath the armor, obviously. I wanted the show to be pretty much, very dark, black and brown. And for the Sound of Music, it was done with the Salzburg Marionette Theater. It took me a year and a half to design this. I have to design these 2 feet tall, 2.5 feet tall marionettes from head to toe. The first thing I had to do is draw the faces. And one thing that I really learned from working with this company, because they have such a tremendous history, I went to their archive house where all the other puppets were, different shows. And is that it's very important that these puppets' faces are not symmetrical, because once they're symmetrical, then they become doll-like and also dead. So when they're asymmetrical, when the puppet's head is turning around, the light would catch it in different ways. So it has a much more range of expression. So that was a very big lesson that I have learned. And here are the faces for the nuns and Maria, Liesel. And so basically I was a little bit reinventing the archetype here a little bit, with some of the, different faces. I love Kurt, he's so cute. I just think he really loves eating cookies. And so I gave him a cookie to Brigitte, Marta, and Gretel. We really took a long time, the director, Richard Hamburger, and I, to like really work on every face. I mean, it took a long time to figure that out. And then, the costumes, and they were made by the Salzburg Festival tailors and dressmakers. And they were just really beautifully, they were all carved out of linden wood, and they were carved by a Swiss carver. And the painting of the face was done by, the faces were done by German and Austrian painters. And puppets, they don't do any quick changes. So when they change clothes, you have to have another puppet. So there were a lot of puppets. They just switch puppets, right? So for the curtain clothes, instead of the curtain, I wanted this curtain to be like of different fairy tales. So so they're kind of each wearing their own little fairy tale that they get to create. So that to me is the extra level of symbolic meaning of the curtain close. And here are these puppets, and they're just really incredible. And they made real beautiful, like detailed clothes that are real, like, you know, like for clothes for human. They didn't really do any cheating. And here are the nuns with Maria, and the wedding. Oh my God. And you know, when you rehearse with the puppets, the puppeteers are way up. So you're sitting in front of a really small proscenium, and if you give notes, the puppets are the ones who nod and say, oh, I got the note. And here's the curtain call, and there's also the puppet within puppet moment at the end. And then here's Aida, which I did at San Francisco Opera. And Aida here to me is really very much about the idea, like I was really kind of thinking back on the idea of ancient Rome, where it's like always ready to conquer, very militarized empire, right? Ready to expand its territory, always very imperialistic. And Ethiopia in this particular production is sort of like an independent kingdom that has been now absorbed, right, into Egypt, like very much like ancient Egypt was like gradually absorbed as part of Roman Empire later on, right? So the war in a way is sort of like civil war, right? Ethiopia is sort of like, you know, they're more like insurgent, you know, group. So this is the Egyptian army. I wanted it to be very much based on very imperialistic looking like World War I uniform. You get the idea of, you know, again, very, you know, the ranks are very obvious. You can see it, you know, from far away. I mean, that's how ancient Rome was, you know, with all of the way they, you know, wear their togas with the clavi, with the strips that was appliqué. So you go down the street, you know, who are prostitutes, who are senators, who is who. You know, that's the kind of society where true love cannot exist, right? And here's the Radames, you know, progress, you know, through the ranks, rising through the ranks. And so in this militarized world, to me, like even the priests are military priests. So it's very important that, you know, you always see like who they really are all the time. So I wanted these robes to be translucent so you can see the military uniform underneath. And this is Ramphis, right, with his high-ranking priest, and so he has his, even the priest robes has its form of insignia as well, right? And the priestess sort of follow the same vocabulary, the robe as the men's. And in this world, women are object to show off the men's wealth and status. So they're very decorative, ornamental, right? Because they are displays, right? And here are all the Amneris outfits. And this is Aida, and her colors are very much based on the Suma. I mean, there are different tribes in Ethiopia, but I really just kind of pulled out the Suma tribes to contrast the colors with the Egyptian color palette. And in this world, all of the women are very ostentatiously dressed, you know, lots of detail, lots of jewelry, but these colors are only shown to each other. They cannot, they have to kind of hide it when they go out to the world, when they're in the presence of men in public. And in this world, even the children are, you know, highly militarized, you know, they're like, you know, all wearing military uniform, they're playing with guns or things that look like guns, and they're doing military formation. And when the women have to go out and for the procession, they have to put on this white robes to cover all this color that you only get to see in Amneris apartment for like a glimpse. And we have also Ptah, who is the god we have a woman representing Ptah, even though it's a male god, but it's a dance moment where the god's breath was said to give life to everything at the beginning. So it's very much about movement and change. And here are all the Ethiopians, prisoner of war. And here are some of the research plates that I was looking at. And all the children army in the world, so scary. And on some of the women's clothing and the hair. Some of the, you can see the priest clothing, and these are the research for the European Ethiopians. And we also look at refugees, current refugees right now. And these are all the different fabric textile that we were looking at for the, and the decoration of the collar, very blinged out. And here are the textiles for the Ethiopians. And the border for Aida was based on this motif that we got. I did the drawing and we hand silkscreen lace pattern. And some of the fitting photos. And here are some production photos. Amneris, Aida. This is Ptah. And the set was designed by this graffiti artist. It's really amazing. I hear all the women in their colorful robes. And in their white robes. That's all I got.
Thank you so much, Anita, for this wonderful story behind the scenes. So if you want to drink some water right now is the time to do that, because we do have great question from our audience. So I try to categorize the question a little bit. So I think it's mainly have two types. Like one is about general career path. Another one is more like specific production involves. So let's start with the general career path. So one of our attendees asked, what was the most difficult thing about being a costume designer when you were just starting, and how did you overcome those challenges, I think?
In what way though? I'm just trying to figure out. I mean, I have so many, it's so difficult to be an artist in this country, right? I would say, you know, I was married when I first started. So I was very fortunate that I didn't have to worry about rent. I made very, very little money the first few years. I mean, the first, one of the first shows I worked on when I got out of school was with Richard Foreman. Really great theater artist. We did work on the production of The Universe. It was like a 2 month dress rehearsal. Every day was dress rehearsal. And I got paid $500 for that. So it was very challenging to figure that out. But I would just say I was also very lucky that I had an agent when I was at school. I met my agent, and so I have some opportunities to meet different people. And I also, you know, we had a clam bake, which was an exhibition of our work, and I also made some connections there. I would say it is not easy to get a job, but I would say the most important thing is really try to go see theater. I know right now there isn't much, but see as much as possible. Even like, you know, if you can see recordings of theater. And what I have also done was I've always loved Stephen Wadsworth's production of Marivaux's plays, because Marivaux is not often done in this country. And it is sort of like it's sort of like commedia and also very Jane Austen at the same time. It's a very beautiful blend of you know, something very delicate but also, you know, very funny. And I would just take a train to the McCarter to see his plays by myself all the time. And I wrote a letter to him, and he responded, and he met with me, and he called a few theaters for me. So, you know, the people in theater community are, you know, we are a community. We're very generous in that way. And, you know, just reach out to the people that their work really, you know, inspire you. And it is definitely a really great way to make a connection. Until today, you know, I'm still, you know, very, you know, good friends with Stephen, and, you know, he's just such an inspiration. And I've worked with him on projects before. So yeah, believe in yourself and you can make it happen.
Thank you so much. I think this advice means a lot for a lot of like new grad student, like no matter which level you are. Thank you for the encouragement. So let's go to more production specific. So one participant he asked, what and how do you do to prepare for first design meeting or conversations?
You have to know the script very well, backwards and forwards, and just write down your first impressions. It's very important to jot down your first impressions because sometimes they are visual, you know, and or sometimes like whatever that shocked you or moved you, write those down, because these are like, you know, what you have as your basic tools to communicate with the director and see what you have in common, right? And then you can also, of course, write down the questions that you might have that would come up. I think that's the most important, is really try to figure out, and the other thing is figure out the, you know, dramatic structure of the piece, because most of the time we don't design according to the plot or the themes. Yes, but the structure is very important because it's really about how the story is being told, right? It's not, we're not just here to say this is a good guy, that's a bad guy, he's being punished, like, you know, but it's how do we get there, right? So it's like how each character reveal him or herself to you, right? And that's how the story is constructed and written. So you have to know how that works in order to figure out how you're going to design to either support that or counter that at different moments, right? So I think if you know all of these very well, then it's really, really go in ready to listen. You know, I always take a couple of minutes to just empty myself, even of myself, empty everything out before I go into the first meeting, because you're really just a vessel to receive information. You know, it's very important to, and just get your ego out of the way. You know, it's really about collaboration.
Thank you so much for that approach explanation. And also, one of our audience is curious about, in general, what is a design challenge you faced that required a particularly creative solution that worked out well? One that you might have changed? Well, I bet there is 100, right? So which one would be the most memorable one? I think.
Well, I would just say this. Even when you do a sketch, the sketch is only 10% of the product. Once you meet the actors, a lot of times you don't know the actors, or most of the time you do know the singers in advance, but in an opera, but the actors you don't know, and you have to sometimes start from scratch because it's not the person who's being cast. So you have to be ready to let that go, and you have to really be ready to see the person right before you. So I would say that would be the biggest challenge, because at the end of the day, like, I don't have to be on stage and, you know, convince the audience to believe in my story. It's the actor who has to do that. And so you're kind of just making a car for the actor. But if the actor can't drive the car, then what's the point of the car, right? So so it's really that's like your final collaboration, I would say, you know, and you have to both have ownership of this. So I don't know if it answered your question in a very specific way, but in general, that is always the, you know, the final frontier, let's say.
I totally agree with you, like, because we keep telling our student, like, try to do a good rendering, but we have to pay attention to the work after the rendering. And I totally agree with you, like, rendering is over 10% or even less, I think. in some circumstance. Then, thank you. I think that did answer the question because you did mention how important the actress is going to work with the costume, and our job is to make sure the garments work for them to tell the story. Yeah. And also, we have one participation asks, and do you work in both costume design and construction? I guess the answer to this bigger scale production, you might not be able to work on construction. But the next question is, what do you find out most important in communication between those drapers and pattern makings and stitchers to execute those design in the final stage? Like how we can push these rendering to a good final product through communication.
Okay. So the first thing is, I sew terribly. I don't sew well. No one will be fired. And you know, sometimes I tell people sewing is against my religion, so I'm like, be off. So, but I am interested in how things are constructed, as you can see, because sometimes you can't just design, you can't just draw. You have to like make it and see it and look at how, you know, look at the 360 and, you know, and you have to use your hands to design it. So that's why I make the mini model, but they're just so poorly made. I mean, you shouldn't follow how I make them, you know, but it's a way to figure out proportion, scale, and methodology. I would say to work with a draper, definitely. I feel like a lot of times a really great draper, they bring in more to what you could even think of, because I'm not fast, so I'm not an expert in you know, sewing or, you know, different ways to reach a shape. You know, maybe there's a way to make this 3D shape lighter so it would bounce when this person, you know, want to run across the stage, and that could be a funny moment. And so the engineering is also a very big part of a lot of these costumes that I do. So I really rely on all of them, and you know, really without, and down to the stitcher. If you have a very difficult fabric that needs to float, but you know, somebody doesn't stitch well, it's gonna look terrible. And so, I mean, everybody contribute. That's why it's very important to, every time a show opens, I really take the time to thank every single person who worked on the show, no matter, you know, how seemingly insignificant, you know, down to the person who just like sew something by hand. That's, you know, if you don't sew well or if you don't care, then it makes a huge difference. So everybody contribute to something. So yeah, I'm very lucky that I met such great people in my life. So otherwise I can design till the cows come home. It doesn't matter. I can draw, like, you know, but if there's nobody to make it, then who cares, right?
Thank you. And we have 4 minutes left, and we do have more questions popping out, but I do want to, let's pick one. Okay, so what do you feel is the most important thing a costume designer can bring to a production vision? I know it's a very broad question, but I think it's a good one for us to wrap up our topic for today, because it's like a good conclusion question.
I would say this, what we do is we're almost like a conductor. We are conducting visual images on stage, right? So sometimes you want to hear all the horns section, and they come out, and so you might want a moment where it's like, you know, very colorful and full, big shapes. And then you might sometimes you want to hear a solo, just a flute. And then you just see like this, you know, thing twirling by, you know. So you're like kind of conducting how the sequence is being received, right? So that's how you have to think. You can't just think about this main character, and you have to think about the movement of the piece as well. And, you know, for example, like a lot of times in Western theater, you know, in European theater, you know, all the elements always come together to support a moment. But sometimes in, like, for example, Japanese Bunraku theater, right, which is a Japanese puppet theater, you know, you don't have to always use all the elements to come together to tell the story. Sometimes you would only use one musical instrument to tell one part of that, you know, story. Sometimes you just have the scenery tell that part of the story. Sometimes it's the puppet and the costume. So, you know, so you have to also make sure that you don't always need a full on thing, right? So what is that separate one thing that really hit you at the spot at this time, right? So yeah, so to me, I think that's why dramatic structure is so important to, when you consider how you approach design. And costume definitely is very much about this way of, you know, you're like arranging the music, you're orchestrating it, right? And conducting it, right? So you can listen better, right? Hear better, right? So I think that would be the closest metaphor I can come up with to explain the importance of what we do.
Thank you so much, Anita, for bringing us to your storytelling world through costume, through textile, and your thinking process. And I totally echo your conclusion question, like your answer is, I think you're pretty much talking about like we have to give space to other areas. So it's important for us to pick in our most important part and to tell it very thoroughly, I think.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. And even though we cannot hear the applause from the attendees because they're all muted, but I really want to thank you and for spending time with us, for all the attendees here. So please remember, Anita is our very first guest for our series. We have 3 wonderful women, like wonderful female designer coming in the next several weeks. So please join us again. And thank you very much. And I hope you're safe and wonderful in this winter time. Thank you, Anita, again. Thank you.
To you all.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.